And then we got into microservices, and now we're playing around with functions. So why did that happen? Start by looking at the original monolith. So about a decade ago, this was current state of the art. You built your monolithic application. If you tried to split it into chunks, you found that you could only make the chunks so small before it got too slow. And that's because we were passing these big fat chunks of XML back and forth. We were doing SOAP calls. People remember SOAP and XML, right? That was a pretty slow way of doing things. We had 1 gigabit networks, and you could only pass things around so many times before you'd burn up your latency budget, right? So if we sort of fast forward about 5 years, we'd gone to 10 gigabit networks. We were using JSON and binary encodings, REST calls. We got away from all the SOAP stuff. And we're running orders of magnitude faster interactions. And this really let us break our application into the chunks that we wanted. So the problem with the first time around SOA was that we weren't actually able to get the services down to the right size. And what really enabled the microservices revolution was that we have the efficiency to be able to do a fair amount of work, even though, when you hit your home page, this is the services that are, returning just that home page, or that single request is going through an awful lot of work. And the fact it's inefficient, but it lets you optimize for something else, because we have enough efficiency in the underlying infrastructure that we're able to iterate and get our development timescales to speed up a lot. So the real benefit here is you're able to innovate independently and deploy independently and upgrade everything. But if we took that monolith and we broke it into microservices, a lot of the pieces of that monolith turned into individual services. And many of those services turned into very common things. Like I have some kind of storage part in my monolith that became a storage service. I had some kind of queuing system that turned into a service. So the next phase was we started to recognize that out of all of those microservices we'd built, a lot of them were just off-the-shelf standard things. So we started to replace them with SQS and DynamoDB, SNS, things like that. And what was left, the services we actually had to write, are the ones in the middle. This is the business logic, it's the glue between the bricks. And sort of my best analogy for think about AWS is it's now like 100 different shapes of Lego brick, and we give you the plans to assemble it into whatever you want. So think of the Lambda functions as sort of super glue to glue together your bricks. And what we're able to do is break up these functions into into individual functions. So the services start to break apart. And then the other thing that was interesting was it all became completely ephemeral. So I've got this whole thing grayed out because it's not doing any work. And when a request comes in, it wakes up some Lambda functions, wakes up that service, and in between, it's really not doing anything. And this is kind of a very simplified view of what happens in a serverless sort of environment. But the point here is that when it's idle, it shuts down. It's not doing any work. It costs nothing to run. So there's two things about the whole serverless evolution here. One is that the cost of running it is very low, particularly if you have spiky workloads or you want to scale down to 0 at certain times. All right. Particularly if you're a startup, we're seeing a bunch of startups serverless first because they don't have customers yet, but they can build out all their functionality. And if somebody ever uses it, the capacity is there on demand. So that kind of capability is excellent for startups. It's excellent for prototypes. And we're seeing lots of enterprises use it for internal IT apps that have very spiky workloads. Nobody's using them at the weekend, all those kinds of things. So that's one aspect, the low cost to run. The other one is they're extremely fast to develop because I'm only having to write the glue. The other service is already up and running. I don't have to spend forever trying to figure out how to install and run Kafka. I have Kinesis. I don't have to figure out how to install and run a database. I just use DynamoDB. It's already there. It works at scale. It's reliable. There's just much less work. And I've got lots of examples of customers taking projects that were taking months doing it the other way, doing it in days with serverless. It's not just a few percent faster. It's orders of magnitude faster. And I think that these two reasons are the key thing that why serverless is very interesting right now. Quick to build and low cost to run. So that's really what I'm seeing as business logic evolves nowadays.